So we're going to start our little week of Photoshop lessons. This is not going to be everything that Photoshop does. Photoshop's a very robust program, and it does a lot of stuff. So we're just going to scratch the surface. But I need everyone to pay attention. So no talking, no side conversations, no phones. Please just pay attention. Either look up at, well, really, you should be looking at the screen and looking at what I do. But there are times when you can be looking at your computers if you want to follow along. So before we get started with Photoshop itself, we need to make sure that you are set up properly with the right files. All right, now, on the L drive, which we don't really use anymore, but it's just where I keep files and stuff in case people need to grab them. I have the folder that you need with all of your files in it in two places. It's in the Resources tab of the class website. You can download it from there. You can also download it from the L drive, and I'm going to show you how to get there right now. If you go to, look at the bottom of your screen, you're going to see a row of icons. There's one icon right here that I'm hovering over that says, see, it says Student Lessons. It's basically like a manila folder with a blue letter A on it. All right, if you click on that, you should see a folder called the Lessons Drive pop up, and you'll see a long list of folders that are named after teacher names, okay? Now, if you do not see this folder when you click on Student Lessons, that means you need to refresh your network connection. So in order to do that, here's what you do. You're about to see my really messy desktop here. Or first my email, and then that. All right. On your desktop, you should have a folder called CGHS Tools. Mine's right here. Click on that. You'll see 4 icons show up. Go to Login Script. Double click that. It'll ask if permission to run it or hit cancel. Hit run. You'll see a little black box pop up and some code will scroll by like that. Just don't touch anything. Let it do its business. It'll just take a minute. And what this is doing is it's waking up your network connection. Once you do that, you should be able to then go back to this folder down here, the Lessons Drive. Click on it. Then go to my name, Kempel.Chris, right here. Double click on it. Whoop, where'd you go? There it is. It played a trick on me. Okay. You will see a folder titled Happy Box Image Resources. That contains the files that we're going to be using. Simply right-click and hit Copy on that folder, Happy Box Image Resources. Now you can minimize that. Then you're going to right-click anywhere on your computer, on your desktop, in your documents, wherever. Right-click again and hit Paste. And once you do that, it will paste a copy of that folder and its contents to your computer. Do not simply open the folder from the L drive and start mucking around in there, because you're going to overwrite the master copies of those files. And if you do that, you're going to hose everybody. So make sure you have your own copies of the folder that are saved locally to your computer. It might take a minute. Now, from now on, whenever you access these files, you are to do it from the local copy on your computer. You are no longer to go to the L drive to get them. Is that clear? The only time you go to the L drive is that one time to copy the folder, and that's it. From now on, you use your own copy of the folder. Once you've done that, now you can open up Photoshop. There should be a little blue box at the bottom that says a little PS in it for Photoshop. Some of you have it, some of you don't. If you have it, click on it, and that will open up Photoshop. If you don't have it, go to your Windows button. Click on it. It'll list all the apps that are and programs available on your computer. Scroll down to Adobe Photoshop, which is right here. Click on that, and it will open up Photoshop for you. When you open up Photoshop, this is what you'll see when you first open it. It'll just be blank. This is the Photoshop workspace. Okay? So now we're going to learn how to just open files and do some basic stuff on the first day. All right. The first file you're going to want to access or open when you do this is called template.jpg. And that is available in your folder. If you go to Happy Box Images, right here, see this folder called template? That's what you open. So you can do this one of two ways. If you have the folder open along with the program, you can simply click it and drag it over to Photoshop like that, and it will open it. It'll take a second. Bam, there it is. Or you can do it the traditional way. Go to File, go up to File, go File, Open, and find the file and open it that way. Either way. Okay? Now what you're looking at is how Photoshop displays open files. It's just kind of like Windows. And you can have multiple files open, but they're only going to display kind of like one at a time. Okay? Usually when you open up a file, let me open up another one just to show you what I'm talking about. It's going to anchor them to the top of the screen. Let's open up this big bat symbol thingamajig. All right. Now watch what happens. It opens it, and you see it completely overrides the other file. It's still there. It's still open. You got to click on it to get it back. So it anchors them to the top like this. If you want to have floating images, so you can see more than one at a time, simply click on the title bar and drag it down and unattach it from the top here. And now you have floating windows, right? Like that. If at any point you want them back again, you simply bring it to the top, wait till it turns invisible, and then it'll reattach itself. Okay? All right. What? Okay. Hold on a second. Getting back to this now. We had a few questions. The other thing that I neglected to mention is the other thing you can do is if you have a file like this, you can right click on it and do open with right here. Right click, do open with, and then select Photoshop, and you can open it that way as well. All right, so different ways of doing the same thing. All right, so now that we have our template open, you can see that this is basically just like a blank box, like unfolded, flattened out. You can see all four sides. We are going to be filling these sides up with graphics, text, content of varying kinds. All right. So what I'm going to do is kind of go through some of the Photoshop stuff step by step. If you're not familiar with it, show you what each tool does on the toolbar and up above. And then we'll just kind of practice with some of these images that are in the folder that you copied. All right, again, this is just for practice. Eventually, you guys will get your own assets. You'll find your own, just like I found mine. Mine's all kind of Batman related for obvious reasons, because I like Batman. But whatever theme you decide on, you're going to find assets. You're going to save them all to one folder, just like this, so that they're easy to get to. Logos, images, whatever. Okay? All right. So let's just start up at the top and work our way across some of these functions. File is pretty self-explanatory. Almost every software program has a file menu where you can do the basic stuff like create new files, save files, print. Most of the time, you can just use hotkeys because those command keys are pretty universal, no matter whether you're in Microsoft Word or Photoshop. Control Z means undo. Control C means copy. Control V means paste. Control P means print, right? I mean, it's pretty universal. So unless you're going to do something unusual, you probably won't need to visit this menu very often. The one thing I will say is that if you go up here to open recent, this is kind of handy. It shows you all of the files that you've recently had open that you've been working on in Photoshop, and it saves you a little hunting time. You can open up Photoshop and just go open recent, go right to your template, and it'll open it. Everything else is pretty self-explanatory. The stuff about bridge you don't need to worry about. Export, generate, you don't need to worry about any of this stuff. Okay? So that's the file menu. Edit. This is going to come in handy when you want to scale or rotate elements. You're going to be able to take, for an example, or do fills and strokes. For an example, let's take this Batman guy and drag him over as a separate file. Okay. If I want to drag Batman into this box, I can get the move tool, drag him over. But he's pretty small. in comparison to the box. If I want to make him larger, I simply go to Edit, Transform, Scale, and if I hold down the Shift key, I can constrain the proportions and I can make him bigger or smaller or whatever. Now notice he looks kind of choppy, kind of pixelated. That's because I'm in mid transformation. This is just rendering a temporary thing. That's not the way the final is going to look. If I hit enter, it sharpens up a little bit. And now I can move him around, do whatever I want to do. All right. Whenever you bring in a new element into Photoshop, like whether you drag it in or do a copy paste, it's going to put it on a new layer. We're going to go more in depth into layers later, but just know that layers is one of the most important concepts to understand about Photoshop. Okay? We'll get more on that later. So this is what the edit menu is for. You can scale. You can go to transform and rotate. Now I can make him go sideways, upside down, diagonally, whatever. All right. You have to hit enter to make it permanent though. If I don't like it, I can just hit Control Z and undo it and bring it back to where it was. All right. I'm going to delete the white space around Batman because it's annoying me. I'm going to select it with the magic wand tool and just hit delete so I can show you some other stuff. Under the edit menu, not only do you have transform, I'll show you what skew does and distort. Skew just makes things look, like in perspective or something. You can do crazy stuff with it. I don't know why you would possibly need to do something like that, but that's what that does. You can do edit, transform, warp, or you can go in and really make it look distorted like a funhouse mirror kind of a thing. Again, I don't know why you would really want to do that, but there you go. Hit enter to make it permanent. And then once you do that, Control Z to undo it, and it will go back to its original thing. Now, let's say you undo, like you do something and you don't like it, but you have more than one undo that you want to do. Then you go to step backward or step forward. That will take you further back. That will give you more undo. So Alt Control Z is the hotkey for that. All right, so edit is the menu for the undos and the step backwards and forwards. Fill and stroke are the other two things I want to talk to you about. A fill is basically just filling a color with a selection. All right, so let's say I have something selected here. On a layer. If I go edit fill, make sure that's set to foreground color, set to normal, it'll fill the selection with a color. The colors you choose down here in the corner. They're little color swatches, foreground and background color. You can also select them up here. This little box down here shows you which color you currently have selected as your foreground color, which is blue. All right. Stroke is when you outline a character or a selection. I'm going to select Batman right here, and I'm going to go edit stroke. I'm going to change the color of the stroke to something bright like a red. hit OK. I'm going to make sure that it's set to the outside, and I'm going to change 12 to, I don't know, 20 pixels. Hit OK. Now it added an outline around. You see that? Because I had a selection there. All right, so that's what fill and stroke does. Fill is filling a color. Stroke is outlining something. Image is where you do things like adjust brightness and contrast and levels and hue saturation. So we will get more into that in a minute. Most of this is just altering the look of an image or a layer. Layers are, again, the most important concept to understand about Photoshop. Think of a layer like a separate, like they're separate sheets of like acetate or plastic, and they're transparent except for what's on that layer. So what you can do is have elements that are separate from each other in an image, and that way you can move them around and manipulate them without affecting the rest of the image, right? If as soon as I brought an image like this into the box, it suddenly became part of the image, I couldn't do anything with it. I couldn't move it around. I couldn't scale it. I wouldn't have the freedom to design anything. All right. If you look down here, this is my layers window. All right. If you don't have this window open, you cannot work in Photoshop without layers. So you would go over here to window, and you would go down to where it says layers and check that box. If I uncheck it, it goes away. But I definitely need to have it open. So also F7 is the hotkey for that. But notice, look down here at the layers right now. Right, you see I have Batman on top here. It's kind of standing there, chilling out. There's a little eye icon to the left of each layer. If I click that eye, the layer gets turned off like a light switch. The layer is still there. It's still part of the image, but the visibility has been turned off. All right. Now, if I were to take another image, let's bring another one in here. Let's go bring this bat symbol back up. Let's go ahead and bring this into the image as well. Now notice that right now, this black bat is on top of, it's covering Batman. Whenever I move it here, it goes in front of him. That's because the layer that bat symbol is on is above the Batman layer in this layer stack. You see that? If I were to left click and hold and drag that layer down underneath so that it's below, let's do it the other way. Let's take Batman and bring him above it. Now watch. See, now it's behind him because I have changed the order of the layers. And you can only move and manipulate whatever image is on the layer you have selected. So see, right now I have the Batman layer selected, layer 1. So whenever I click the move tool, only Batman moves around. But if I go and click on layer 3, which is the Batman layer, I mean the bat symbol layer, now I'm moving that one around. You see? So the order of the layers affects visibility, and which layer you have selected affects what you can manipulate or not manipulate. Does that make sense? That's a really important distinction that beginners have a hard time grasping. But once you get the hang of it, it's essential to do anything in Photoshop with. Okay. So we'll get a little more into layers later, but we're going to kind of move on now and get into some of these other things. Type. This is when you use the type tool and put text on your image. You can go in and do some things with that. Filter. Think of filters like special effects. We will spend a lot more time on filters later, but that's what that does. View. Again, this is mostly to sort of show like rulers and guides and things if you need them. If you want to turn a grid on or off, this is where you do it. View, show grid. You guys remember that from when we did the stippling assignment? You can turn your rulers on and off. Like right now, you see I have these rulers up here on the sides. I can go to view rulers, uncheck that, and then the rulers go away. So it's just kind of there to, you can zoom in, zoom out. That's all it really does. Window is a list of all the different floating menus that you can have open in Photoshop, and there's a lot of them. But as I mentioned earlier, the only one you really need is layers. And, obviously options and tools you need open. And having swatches is good too. The tool presets and all that, it's up to you. But really, that's all you need, because I don't like having too many floating windows open because it really clutters up the workspace. So all I usually ever have open are swatches and layers. Okay. 3D, you don't have to worry about. Help, you don't really need to worry about. This next row below the function menus, these are the tool option menus. And these change depending on which tool you have selected. Now, if you look on the left-hand side of the screen, this is your toolbox for Photoshop. These are all the different tools you can use to manipulate and edit objects in Photoshop. And they are organized by function. Okay, so this first one up here is what I've been using. It's the move tool. It's what you use when you want to move elements around in Photoshop. Okay, but again, you can only affect whatever image is on the layer you have selected. So if you want to select, move a different thing, you select a different layer. These next three tools are called the selection tools, and they all do the same thing, but they do them in different ways. This first one is called the marquee tool, and you can either do a rectangular, an elliptical, or a single row, single column. Okay? And what this does is it allows you to select an area, but for the rectangular one, you can only do it with a 4-corner type selection. So if you're selecting big areas or areas with straight edges, this is what you would use. Okay. If I hold down the Shift key while I click and drag, it stays a square. It constrains the proportions. Otherwise, it kind of is freeform like that. Now, the thing about a selection, selections are basically there to tell Photoshop, hey, pay attention to what's inside this dotted shape and ignore everything else. So let's say I would like to paint a color onto this box. If I go down here and get the pencil tool and select a color, and I go to paint red over here, nothing's happening. Why is that? Because I have a selection active. So it's only going to color in what's inside that selection, right? I can go outside it all I want, but it's not going to do anything unless it's in the selection. Okay. If I want to move a selection around, I simply make sure I still have the selection tool selected. And I click inside the selection and I can move it around to other parts. So if I were to move this over Batman here and make sure I'm on the Batman layer, and then I got the move tool, watch what happens. It moves whatever was in the selection. All right. And, you know, that's the rectangular ellipse, you know, the elliptical one, same thing, except it's a circle or an oval, depending on whether or not you hold down shift. But it's kind of handy. Like you can use this to make shapes. You can do that and then go edit, fill. And then, well, before I do that, I want to create a new layer down here. And then I can go edit, fill. And I can fill it with whatever colors in my foreground. And then I can put something inside that shape and I can make little cool graphics. And then if I want, I can do edit stroke and change the color like a yellow. Hit OK. Let's do the inside of the circle. All right. So you can make shapes, do cool stuff with the marquee tool. Next up is the lasso tool. Now this does the same thing. It creates selections, but this does it with freehand. So I can just draw any freehand shape I want. This is easier to do with a mouse. And then it turns it into a selection. So I can go in and hit delete. And now it deleted that, whatever was in my selection. Okay. So kind of cool. There are two different types of lassos. Well, there's three, but there's two that we use for the most part. The regular lasso and then the polygonal lasso. Polygonal lasso also draws a freehand selection, but it does it with a series of straight lines and points. Okay, but same concept. All right, so that's the lasso tool. Then finally, we have the magic wand / quick selection tool. And these are used mainly to isolate elements from a background. Basically, these tools create selections by selecting pixels, certain colored pixels. And it will select, the magic wand will select every pixel that's the same color that you're clicking on. So right here, I've got this red shape. If I get the magic wand and click on that red, see it's selecting the entire red shape because it's all the same color. If I go to Batman here and click on Batman, you see how he's only, let me go to that layer. Batman is only being, you know, selected based on the color it is. It's not selecting the whole figure. It's just parts of it. Okay. We're going to stop here. And are there any questions or anything major? Look, if you guys haven't used Photoshop before, this is kind of confusing, but it will get easier the more you do it and play around with it. So what I'm doing is I'm recording a lot of this stuff so that, and then I'll post it to the website. And then tonight or at home or whatever, you can go back and rewatch it and follow along. Okay. I think once you just do it a little bit, you'll get more comfortable and it'll become easier. But if you're not getting it, if you're confused, don't stress about it. Don't worry. You will get the hang of it. If for some reason your computer wasn't running correctly, like you couldn't open Photoshop, you couldn't access things, take it to STARS or come see me and I'll try to help you. All right, we will continue this tomorrow. Have a good day.